Welcome to our next class. This week we will look at the scope plane, which is element number 2 in the user experience text. So let's review the 5 elements. Last week we looked at the strategy, and this is the very most important part. This is where we determine what we're doing and who we're doing it for. So we look at the goals and objectives and the users. Based on that information, now we go to the scope plane where we start looking at the content requirements and the features. What type of content do we need and what type of interactions do we possibly need? So remember, the strategy, the first plane, is extremely important. We outline what are we doing and why are we doing it. We determine the goals, objectives, and needs. And very important, we look at who the users are. What are their goals, objectives, and needs, in addition to those of the company and the stakeholders. So at the scope plane, which is this class, we actually take those goals and those users and we translate that information into the strategy. And we translate it into some specific requirements. We determine what the content needs to be and what the functionality or features need to be based on the goals and who the users are. So there are primarily 2 components of the scope phase. One is the content specifications, which has to do with the product as a source of information, and the functional specifications, which has to do with the product, kind of like a software application. It's going to be doing something. Now, not all products will be doing something. Some might just be a brochure or a logo or a business card. But here again, this is what goes on in the scope phase, and together we call these things features. Okay, the content requirements. This is from the business itself, the stakeholders, the marketing department, also from the users, research, any other type of branding. So the actual content that we're using is going to come from a lot of different sources. Now the functional specifications, how that content is essentially integrated, that's going to be dependent on the goals, on the users, and on the product itself. Here again, a video game is going to have a lot of more functionality built into it than a website, than a static brochure. So the scope plane is very important. This is where we start looking at what we are building, and we need to get some clear specific requirements for our product. We also need to know what we are not building, because a lot of times we get a little bit carried away and we wind up over our heads because we didn't realize the difference. There is a term out there in the industry called scope creep. And this is when the scope gets out of hand because we really didn't identify it in the beginning. We start adding requirements, adding features. So scope creep refers to these uncontrolled changes or continuous growth in the project scope. If you're familiar with this concept of project management, this is where this term pretty much originated. Here again, you might be a one-man team, you might be developing a product for a client, or you might be a member of a team. And in that case, you might have a project manager. And it's very important that we keep focused on what we're doing so that we can complete our project within the right amount of time, spending the right amount of money. So when the scope is not properly defined, documented, or controlled, it runs into money, additional cost, and additional time. So that's something you really need to pay attention to. Okay, back to the scope plane. We're talking about content requirements first before we go into functional specifications. They will be in the second video. All right, so the product as an information source. The first thing you want to do is you want to determine what are the requirements for our content. What types of documents do we need? Do we have existing documents? Or do we need someone on the team to produce some documents, to write some copy, so to speak? Graphics. Do we have nice photos? Or do we need to have someone take them or develop them? What other media might we need? So it's not just a matter of knowing what we're doing, but we have to start looking at what type of content we need. Do we have it? If not, what's going to happen in order for us to obtain that? So you might hear the term a content audit or a qualitative audit, especially if you're redesigning something. This is where you analyze the quality and effectiveness of the content that you have based on the project to determine whether it's useful, whether it's usable, whether it's enjoyable, whether it's persuasive to your audience. So we take a look at what we have and we analyze it, and then we determine if we're going to use that or if we are going to develop new content. Sometimes you might have people talking about developing a matrix, a spreadsheet, all right, so that we have all of the content in one place and we're all on the same page, we know what we're doing. The headings and the subheadings, the terminology that we're going to be using, this is where you develop all that. If you're developing a website, page 1, page 2, page 3, what is the phrasing, what is the verbiage in those headings and subheadings? Are we going to impose a certain length to them? Any kind of values, accuracy with respect to possibly a mission statement, etc., the history of the company. Here is also where you develop voice and tone, which we're going to talk about later. All right, so getting back to the content, where is the existing content located? Who might be in charge of it? Let's categorize it so that we can make some sense of it in a more easily manner. Is there any date? Is there any author? Do we need to know anything else about this content? Also, this is where you start thinking about your search engine optimization, your metadata, where you develop your marketing terms, your marketing phrases. This is where we identify the gaps. Figure out what we have, figure out what we need to produce, or what we need to edit. This is an example of a content audit for a website. Very simple. Here's a scheme for the ID, scheme for the names. Obviously, it's a big website. And here's where the content is. It makes it a lot easier to go, if you have everything laid out in some kind of a tangible format, to know where things are so you know what you're working with. Here again is another example of a content audit where we have some more fields. Here again, it's the content audit of a website. All right, the different pages, description, some ratings. All right, when it was created, when it was last updated, and who essentially is responsible for that, and then the URL. All right, you might hear this term content strategy. It is an approach on how we interact with content, which is commonly called copy. It's not just how we interact with the content, we interact with the navigation, we interact with the visual design. So this is the strategy that we're employing on this phase or plane. Here again, the content strategy goal is to present information in a meaningful, useful, relevant context. So this is where we look at the content, based on our goals, objectives, and the user, we start organizing it, using the pieces that we need, rewriting it so that it is meaningful, useful, and relevant. We don't do this when we're writing HTML. We do this before we write the HTML, and we copy and paste it in, or whatever tool you're using. All right, content strategy is actually a discipline in itself in the print world, and it's becoming more so also in the web. You might hear terms like information architecture, editors, copywriting, right? This is all part of this discipline called content strategy, and it is used in the next 3 planes also. Here again, content strategy enables us to deliver the right information at the right place at the right time. All right, we just don't throw stuff on the page. We want to put it on the page strategically so that it meets the goals, objectives, and is right for the user. Okay, the content strategy will develop a voice and tone. All right, so what do we mean by a voice and tone? Well, we all have a unique voice. It's just the way we talk. All right, now our tone of voice may vary based on the context. All right, my tone's going to be different when I'm recording a video than if you saw me on the street, so to speak. It's going to be a little bit different when I talk to my dogs. I talk to them like baby talk. All right, so the voice. The voice is a recognizable, consistent way of delivering content, of expressing your brand. You might have values or cultures being conveyed through that voice, and you do this by use the adjectives by which you choose in your content. The tone, on the other hand, is on the context. The tone will be different on the first page, and it might be on a different page, but the voice overall remains the same. All right, so the voice is an expression of who we are, of who the company is, of who the product is, of the brand. All right, it might reflect what the company does. All right, it might reflect why do people visit your site. You might think about that. All right, why do people visit your site? You might want to weave that into the voice. All right, if your brand were a person, how would you describe it? All right, how do you want people to feel when they visit your site? Here again, it's using the word website. It doesn't have to be website. It can be a different product. All right, so you want to start thinking about the users, thinking about your goals and objectives, and determining what is the type of voice that I want to convey, that I want to use for this product. Okay, here again, the voice reflects the brand, the users, and the goals. Users and goals strategy plane. Very, very important. We're always going back to that. The tone, on the other hand, will vary with the content type, the situation, or with the user's emotions. All right, so here again, back to the user. What situation is the user in at the moment? How might she feel? And how is this going to affect the user? So the tone in which we use in different aspects of our product will change, but the voice will remain. Okay, so the voice is essentially what we are saying, and the tone is how we are saying it. Here's an example. For a fashion-related product, so supposing you were marketing a fashion-related product, what types of words might you use? Smart, stylish, sophisticated. So this is like the voice. You would choose your wording, you would choose your phrasing, you would choose your graphics. This is the voice that you want of the page, of the brochure that you're developing. All right, if it were a sport-related product, you might want to use words like energetic, competitive, upbeat. All right, so remember, we're looking at adjectives. We're also looking at the content, and content is also graphics. Here again, a financial institution is going to have a little bit of a different voice. You wanted to say that we are trustworthy, we are straightforward, we have some authority in what we're telling you. All right, so, it wouldn't be trendy or cool. So you start thinking about your product. What do you want to, how do you want to be speaking to the user? All right, so here's an example, and there's the URL for this website should you wish to go out and look at it. And you can even just look at the colors and the layout. It's a little bit meek and passive and needy. All right, it's not real strong. They use thank you, we hope, with love. It's not strong. It's a little weak. All right. All right, take a look at this website, and here's the URL. It says online media. You can just see by looking at it, it's vibrant, it's exciting, it attracts your attention, it's colorful. All right. So what types of words are they using? Passionate, excited. Join us. All right. You see that here's their voice. It's an impassioned, energetic, excited voice coming across in the content. So here's where we're talking about the content strategy is where you develop the voice, how you want it sound to the person who is looking at your product or using your product. Tone. Here's the Nike Swish. On the home page of Nike, there again, very vibrant, very interactive, very direct, also very sales oriented. So that would be the tone. Overall, the voice is, the sport relative voice. Now, on the Contact Us page, the tone will be different. It's going to be more subdued, factual, static. It's not going to be as vibrant, as interactive. So here we have an example of where the voice in the Nike site will be consistent from page to page, but the tone will vary based on the content and the functionality of the different pages. All right, so the voice and tone will put you in control of brand communication and perception. You want to direct how the user is perceiving your product, because ultimately we want them to like us. We want them to buy something. We want them to do something.